So is it me? I'm assuming that because everybody else is quiet, it's my go. Well, it's good to see you all. I must admit, I resonate with Krista's comments in that Zoom has been a blessing for me. It's been great, an amazing tool that's enabled Avondale to keep running. And so we're in now about to come into our 8th week of doing all our lectures by Zoom. And it's been great in terms of we've got students spread around the world, quite literally, all still studying with us, and it's been good. The negative thing is that you wake up in the morning, I come down to my office, I'm normally on Zoom by about, well, I'm getting things ready at 6, we're on Zoom at 8, and then yesterday I finished and I looked at the clock and it was 5:15, and I don't think I'd left my office the whole entire day, just about. And so that aspect of just being stuck in the one place is certainly driving me crazy. But what I thought we'd do today is that I know this is a sermonette. I don't know if I'm that good at sermonettes. And so let's just see how today rolls. I'm going to just share my screen, and I've entitled the, let me just find where my keynote is. Here it is. I've entitled today's talk, Lessons from COVID-19. Now, could somebody, Krista, I can see you. Can you nod if you can just see my screen? Perfect. I can see 4 of you down the side. Everybody else is gone because I'm looking at my screen, obviously. So it's interesting, isn't it? COVID-19 has come along and our world's become a very, very different place. And for us, I must admit, in the Beamish household, it started with quite a bit of stress because in February and March, the 2 women in my house decided that 1, Deborah would go to Japan, and 2, Taryn would go on a Kentucky trip to Europe, and she was in Italy. Now, if you've tracked the history of COVID-19, you know that being in Italy is probably not the best thing, and Japan wasn't that much better, although the virus didn't escalate in Japan anywhere near as fast as it did in Italy. So numerous phone calls backwards and forwards trying to get Taryn out of Italy. Their Kentucky bus actually left Italy as the borders were shut. She went blissfully through Switzerland and other countries and ended up in England, which felt like a pretty safe place until the world went really crazy. And finally, I remember being on a phone to Taryn, sort of midnight desperation. What do we do? I said, Taryn, just go with your friend, catch the train to Heathrow, buy a ticket back to Sydney, no matter what it costs. And so that's what she did. and she ended up just jumping on an Emirates flight and got back to Sydney. So she got the run through at Sydney Airport. This is actually Taryn coming home on the train from Sydney Airport. She had to wear the mask, and then she had to come home and self-isolate for 2 weeks. Deborah actually arrived back before the 14-day isolation period was enforced or put in place. And so, yeah, it was an interesting time. It was particularly interesting when the dog was going berserk because 2 police officers were knocking at the front door, coming to our home just to check, in fact, that Taryn was there. And yeah, it was all pretty amazing. So here we are. We sort of got used to it a little bit now. We're trying to manage our way through this crisis. And I was thinking about this and I thought, you know, is there anything that our Christianity should bring to bear, or as we're going through this crisis, what's the sort of things that Christians should be doing? Well, when I turn to my Bible in Romans, Paul says, don't copy the behaviour and customs of this world, but let God transform you into a new person by changing the way you think. And in particular, in some versions, it talks about the renewing of your mind. Now, it's interesting because I teach psychology at Avondale. And so the mind is actually a pretty interesting thing, and it's made up of a number of intricate systems. And I know there's medical doctors listening to this, and they could probably give me a whole lesson in biology and anatomy of how the brain works. But I just want to draw your attention to essentially, in terms of function, there's 3 main functional areas in your brain that I want to point to. There is the brain stem, which is that little purpley thing hanging down the bottom. Then what you've got right in the middle, you've got the limbic system, which is the emotional center of our brain. And then at that front, that red bit, that's our cortex or prefrontal cortex, where we do a lot of our thinking. Now, it turns out these 3 regions of the brain are all pretty important. In particular, this is the limbic system, just highlighted here in a lady's head. And there's various parts of the limbic system, but the amygdala is get it out. It's a very important part because it's the part that controls our fight and flight and our freeze and survival modes. And it's basically, while it is heavily involved in the regulation of our emotions, it is that part of our brain that quite literally is our emotional center. And it causes us, it can facilitate us reacting very quickly to things. Now this video, I know on Zoom sometimes videos go slow, but this is actually a video in slow motion. And this guy's walking on the footpath and suddenly his limbic system is called on big time because there is somebody coming through, and if he hadn't moved without thinking, he'd be dead. But the fact is, your limbic system can actually kick in and you can do things, and it doesn't have to be processed at all. It's a reaction, and that guy's very lucky. I mean, I've experienced this myself. I'm pretty much into animals, but I must admit, if I was going to be truthful, I'll tell you there's one animal that does give me the creepy crawlies a little bit, and that's snakes. Now, I don't know if you've ever had any up close personal encounters with snakes, but you know, I don't know what it is about them, whether they're just slimy, whether the fact they bite you, you die, you know, something in there. I had an interesting experience during the week, by the way. I got this phone call from Taryn at about 10 o'clock at night, coming home from work, and she rings me up and I said, yo, and she goes, Dad, I'm in big trouble. Now, when your 24-year-old daughter or however she is rings me up and say that, I'm thinking, oh no, what's she done? And then she says, I said, where are you? She said, I'm by the side of the road. And I said, are you in your car? She goes, no, I'm standing beside my car. And I said, well, what's going on? And she said, I was driving along and a big huntsman spider crawled across my leg. And she said, I can't get back in the car. And I said, well, Taryn, I think it's going to rain. I said, my suggestion is, huntsmans, people have them as pets. They don't even hurt you. My suggestion is you just jump in the car and just pretend it's not there. She goes, no, I can't do that. And so in the end, I said, well, you know what? When it starts to rain, there'll be a lot of motivation for you to get in the car. And with that, I basically said, I'll see you when you get here. So she did arrive about 20 minutes later, and what she had on, she had gathered every piece of clothing that she had in the car and put it on so this thing couldn't touch her. And she actually had a towel that she had in the beach in the back seat and wrapped herself up in this towel, and it was amazing. And then when we got there, I had to get up the mortine to get rid of the spider, and I'll tell you, it was this big. So some people can have reactions to things. Snakes is the thing that did it for me. This is actually an olive sea snake. This is the second most deadliest snake in Australia. We were scuba diving at Great Keppel Island, and they live there, and they're very inquisitive. And this thing came out of the rocks, and while I was there, it swam up to me. And as you see it coming towards you, I must admit, your immediate reaction is just to run or swim really fast since you're scuba diving. But the trouble is, you know, you've been told that they're inquisitive, they approach divers all the time, and that you should just be very calm and cool and collected about it all. But you just can't help yourself because that limbic system in your brain's pumping away. And this thing swam up to me, and I said, okay, be cool, be cool, be cool. And what I'm trying to do is to get my prefrontal cortex, the reasoning part of my brain, to override my limbic system and say, no, this is the way you act. That thing swam up to me, and it actually came up and just disappeared inside all my diving gear. And it ended up going in between my BCD. I had a wetsuit on, and it came up, and the next thing I saw, it came up here and just poked its head out, and it was there looking me in the face. And I'm there, okay. Now, the thing is deadly venomous. It does though only have teeth that are 3 mil long, and I was wearing a 5 mil wetsuit. So technically it can't bite me, but it was very hard to suppress the emotion of the moment. Very hard. The thing ultimately swam away, and I'm here and I'm fine. So this limbic system's powerful. It can be an overriding force. Unlike the cortex, where we do all our thinking, what happens with the cortex, it's all about their impulse control and problem solving and decision making and judgments and emotional regulation, all those sort of things, those higher order aspects that we do. And so what we want to do is that whenever the Bible says to us, we want to renew our mind What I want to say to you is this. I personally think that we've got to consider how the mind works and say, well, what exactly does it mean to renew our mind? And in particular, Paul goes on to say, when I was a child, I spoke like a child, I thought like a child, I reasoned like a child. But when I became a man, I gave up childish ways. And it's interesting that when you have a look how children and adolescents work, this is a slide from one of my lectures, adolescents display heightened attention and reactivity to reward and threat. Adolescents display greater reliance on the limbic emotional regions of the brain than the prefrontal control regions. And this is so typical of adolescents who are looking for reward all the time. They're looking for that emotional feedback. That's why Facebook is so addictive to young people, because that dopamine hit that they get every time somebody likes that post is just like rocket fuel for their brains that are heavily limbic centered. Now, for me, when we're talking about, Paul says, I gave up childish things when I became a man, what happens there is that adolescents are more impulsive, aggressive, emotionally volatile, likely to take risks, they're vulnerable to peer pressure, they're prone to focus on and overestimate short-term payoffs, underplay longer-term consequences of what they do. This is young people. I work with them every day because you know why? Your brain doesn't fully develop and transition to a better ratio of frontal cortex to limbic regions until you're around 25. And it was great when Callan turned 26 this year because, he's technically finished and you'd think he'd be making better decisions now that he has now a finished product. Taryn's got 1 year to go and maybe that explains some of the decisions that she makes. The issue is, though, that for me, as we find ourselves in this coronavirus, I think that what's happened is that we have to consider our response, but we have to remember that the very first reaction to this virus was always going to be an emotional one. It was going to be driven by fear. It was going to be driven by that limbic system pushing forward our responses. But at some point, because we are mature people, at some point, what we've got to do is have our frontal cortex, our thinking regions come in and start taking over and give us a more thoughtful reaction to what we should be doing as Christians. I must admit, Facebook's an interesting thing. Lots of things come in my Facebook feed, mainly to do with paragliders and fish tanks. But this one did cross my desk, and I thought it was really interesting that we all have Schrodinger's virus now, it was called. Now, for those of you who aren't scientists, I know some of you have done science, some of you haven't. So Schrodinger's cat was an experiment. It was a thought experiment that was done. And what you do is that you have a cat that is in a box. This box has a radioactive source that, if open, will give out a radioactive gas that will kill the cat. What you've got is there's a gas in there that's deadly and it will kill the cat. And what you've got is a hammer that's poised on the side, and this hammer is going to drop when a radioactive source starts to decay. Now, because we never know exactly with radioactive material, we know their half-lives, how long it takes for half of it to disappear, because we don't know exactly when a particular atom is going to disappear, you never know when that hammer is about to drop. So Schrödinger asked the question, in the box there's this cat. It's got the poison gas in the vial. The hammer is poised and it's all on a random decay act. Is that cat alive or dead? And the answer that scientists came up with in the end is that because we can't observe the cat, the top of the box is shut, that it was considered that the cat had a dual state. It was both alive and dead because we couldn't test it by observation. When we come then to this Facebook post that came that says we all have Schrodinger's virus now, what it went on to say is this: if you haven't been tested, you don't know if you got the virus or not. We have to act as if we have the virus so that when we go out, we don't get too close to other people and we don't infect them. On the other hand, we have to act as if we don't have the virus so that we don't catch it from others because we're not immune. Therefore, we both have and don't have the virus. And I think there's been arguments put forward during this Corona-19 thing about how you need to act in both those ways. Stay social distancing from people because you've got to act as if you're sick so you don't give it to others. Keep away from them so you don't make them sick. And on the other hand, you've got to keep away from people because they might be sick and you don't want to catch it. So for me, I think this is actually reflective of the Christian dilemma that we are currently faced in that in our Christian experience, if we learn from the COVID thing, we both have to act as if we are sick. We have to act as if we are sick, and we have to act as if we are well. Let me explain what I mean by that. I mean, being sick with COVID is not an easy journey. 7:30 ran an excellent program. I'm just going to play just a minute of their show.
Had coronavirus for about 2 months now. It's actually day 64 today. I just talked on the phone for half an hour and this is the result. I'm quite breathless from talking and feel quite dizzy and lightheaded.
Mirabai Nicholson McKellar tested positive for COVID-19 soon after returning from Germany.
One of the most challenging things about this illness, apart from its kind of severity and length, is that there's so much that we don't know about it. And so it's a really vulnerable place to be.
After 6 weeks in isolation at home, she thought she'd finally turned the corner with no symptoms for 3 days. New South Wales Health gave her the all clear to leave isolation, but within days she relapsed and ended up in hospital. She returned a second positive test.
I had steadily increasing chest pain and pressure, and I thought I was over it. I thought I was recovering, and it was really disheartening to kind of end up back there and quite scary. It just feels like it's been this crazy roller coaster. I take 2 steps forward and then 1 step back. I'm kind of nervous now. Every time I feel a little bit better, I kind of get nervous, like, oh no, when's it going to crash?
What happens is that it can be nasty. It can be nasty. The rest of that report talked about this almost debilitating fatigue that some people get after they've had the virus. And if we use that virus as a bit of metaphor for our sort of sinful condition we find ourselves in, Paul actually says, all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. And then in Romans, you get this sense of this sickness, what it does to you and the struggle. In fact, I don't understand why I act the way I do. I don't do what I know is right, and I do the things that I hate. My selfish desires won't let me do anything that is good. Even when I want to do right, I can't. Instead of doing what I know is right, I do wrong. And what a miserable person I am. And for some people, coming to terms with their sinful nature and the fact that they are not as they're meant to be, it's a real struggle. A real struggle. And, and it's not just us in 2020 with COVID-19 around us, where we see people struggling with their health and struggling with their sin condition. If I look at scripture, David, who was considered to be a man after his own heart, he struggled. And just when he felt like he was on top of things, he'd fall again. And some of the things that David did in his life, I suppose his redeeming feature, he ultimately kept going back to God, asking for forgiveness. I think of the giants of the Old Testament, like Elijah, who just been on Mount Carmel and just seen God operate in a very powerful way. And then as he comes down from that, after that huge victory, he hears that Jezebel's out to get him, and he just runs off in the desert and just gets under that tree and says, God, just kill me now. Just because you're a Christian and a follower of God doesn't mean that there won't be struggles. Our imperfect natures keep coming to the fore all the time. It's almost like that emotional part of our brains just take over, and we just can't seem to get on top of things. But we know the solution to that, of course, is that Jesus actually says in Matthew, come to me, all of you who are weary and burdened, and I'll give you rest. And we know that Jesus is the answer, the vaccine, if you want. You know, if we go to him, he actually says, right, I'm going to actually make you well. And so the first step that I think we can learn as Christians from COVID-19 is just a recognition that we're sick, but there's a cure. And that cure for us is found in Jesus Christ. So after we've acknowledged that we're sick, then what we should do is act as we've been made well. Now, Jesus actually said that we're the salt of the earth. In Matthew 5:13, he actually says that what we should be doing is making the world a better place. You should be able to taste the difference due to our involvement. I think in COVID-19, we find that there's a lot of people who are in help, that need help in a time of crisis. I know, you know, I'm fortunate that I am living in a big house and I live on 2.5 acres of land. And so if we needed to, even during isolation, I can live in this house with 3 other people and not even see them during the day. But not everyone's that fortunate. And what happens, I mean, for those people who've lost loved ones, over 100 people in Australia have lost loved ones. You think of the people that have lost their jobs, whose economic future and financial future is in jeopardy. I mean, it's difficult times. You know, Jesus was asked in Matthew 22, what is the greatest commandment? And he said, love your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. And the second is like it, love your neighbour as yourself. So when I see the New South Wales Mental Health Commissioner coming out and saying he recognises that people are feeling worried, stressed and anxious in relation to coronavirus, I think surely there's something that we should be able to do. Given that we've been sick and healed through Jesus and now asked to act, surely there's something that we can do. You know, Jesus told a story about the Good Samaritan when he was asked, who is your neighbour? Who is your neighbour? I mean, surely the message has to be for the community that's out there that they're not alone. Surely what we have to do is recognise that people need help and we should be the ones to help them. And just at the moment, my keynote presentation is giving me the spinning wheel of death. So why don't you just talk amongst yourselves for 10 seconds while I fix this. All right, I think we're back on. Look at that.
What are you going to do?
So for me, I think that what we've got to do is this concept of just letting people know that they're not alone is just so critical. You know, I think that the lesson I'm getting as a Christian from COVID-19 is that the same way that we have to have this dual role to treat that virus, we have to acknowledge that we're sick as Christians, acknowledge that we've been made well, and then act as we've been made well. You know, we need to let people know we care and we can help. And it amazes me some of the stories that I hear about people who are helping. I mean, this guy here is Joshua Wills. He is the rowing coach at St Hilda's in Perth. He's driving along to his school very early in the morning to set up for a rowing regatta, and he sees the top of a taxi in the Swan River. Let's just listen to the story.
The meter wasn't running when this taxi skidded into metre-deep water. Luckily, the only person inside was the driver, but there was no way the 43-year-old could reverse out of this one. It was 5 a.m, pelting down, when he lost control and plunged into the Swan. The real hero of this story is a rowing coach who was driving past at the time. He jumped out of his car, jumped into the freezing water and helped free the driver, who was trapped.
He was in a lot of shock, but after a while we got the door open. The water was all the way up to basically just below his neck. And so had he been another 5-10 metres into the river, he would have been in some serious trouble.
You know, is that driver fortunate that this guy came along? You know, he's a guy who is saying, COVID or not, I can help. And he just didn't stop and think about it. He just went into action because he knew there was good to be done. Let me introduce you to this young lady. Now, do you say it Farah? Is that how you say her name? Now, we got to know Farah through a fairly random act of random circumstance, is that Taryn comes into my office one evening and says, Dad, I've got a Facebook message from this girl. Do you know her? And I said, no. And this is the message. It said, hi, sorry for the random message. My dad found a wallet and wanted me to reach out to see if we could return it to its owner. It belongs to David John Beamish. I sent him a message, but I'm sending you one as well, just in case he doesn't see it. Thanks. And that's my brother. And so I looked at that and then I said to Taryn, oh, it's probably some scam. And then I got on the phone and I rang David. He didn't answer. He's a clinical psychologist and he was in a counselling. So I sent him a text and I said, have you lost your wallet? We've got somebody claiming that they found your wallet. And he immediately, my phone rang and he said, I'm just on the other line to the bank trying to cancel all my credit cards. He said, yeah, I lost my wallet. And I said, well, we have a message from this lady. And I said, well, I give him your phone number. And he said, yeah. And so we just sent this lady David's phone number and said, can you please ring him? And in the end, David didn't even have to leave his house. The guy brought the wallet over. He only lived in the neighbouring suburb. You know, just like an incredible act of kindness when the world's going pear-shaped. I mean, these are people who act. And I just love this. Becky and John Wass. Now, she lives in England and she sent out this note and put it in people's letterboxes and under their doors, and it simply says, hi, you know, my name is, I live locally at, my phone number is, if you are self-isolating due to COVID, I can help with. And she got them to tick a box, and then she said, just call and text me and I'll do my best to help you for free. And she put that in all of the houses in her neighbourhood. Now, what I love about these are people who are called to action, and I strongly recognise in this the idea that God's law is written on people's hearts, and in times of crisis, sometimes this brings out the best of people as they rise to the occasion to help other people out. So the question is, of course, now, what can we do? What can we do? And I think corporately we can do some things. I know that Three Angels, for example, we've just started a campaign there. We're about to have on June 20 an online concert. It's our end of financial year fundraiser. Those kids are really doing it tough over there. I mean, you think COVID's hard in Australia, you should be in Nepal. And so the idea of supporting Three Angels is one thing that we can do. What else can we do? What else can we do in terms of the everyday nature? Because we have been sick and made well, but now we need to act. So what can we do? So what I'm going to do is just stop this share and go back to where I can see you all. There you all are. So, Bob, did you manage to work out breakout rooms?
Only half, so I don't think it's a good idea today.
Okay, so what we'll do is this, is that I was going to split you into some breakout rooms, but maybe let's just finish off. I know I find these chats at the end, you know, it's hard with so many people to sort of coordinate things, but why don't we just have a little think about it and let's come up with 5 suggestions of something that we can actually be doing during COVID that shows as Christians we care. And I don't care if they're small things or big things. What are some ideas that we can do? So you can feel free to unmute yourself and just share your idea when you have it. Now, the really good thing about Zoom is that I actually get to see all of your names, and I know you all anyway. So what I'm going to do is wait for like 10 seconds, and if nobody answers, I'm going to start asking people. Well, that's 5 seconds. So what we're after is what's something we can do. All right, that's the 10 seconds. So we'll have to go to it. Right, Peter Morey, I can see you sitting there, you old wise man. Hit that Carolyn, help him hit the unmute button, would you please? He's probably doesn't know how to do that by himself. And let's see, come on, Peter, what can we do? I might be even to unmute you yourself, man. Let me just work out how to do it.
He's unmuted, isn't he? It's not coming up, you.
Yeah, that's wait, Peter. I'm going to unmute you. What are you called? Charlie Church Adult. My goodness.
What?
Talk, Peter.
I thought I could unmute him, but I don't know if I can.
Peter's the Charlie Church Adult Sabbath School. He's already unmuted there, unless he's having issues with.
I think it's got a red cross through his microphone, but anyway.
No, it's all right now.
Oh, okay, there you go. All right, what's your idea?
Just to help people in our church, I thought we could make certain that Peter Beamish doesn't have to talk again. Then we'd all be in a help mode. But I think what's important is for us to help our very close neighbour. What about your neighbour that's right next door to you in your house? The house beside you, the house in front of you. And I think corporately, have we gone out and sort of looked at the people who are next door to the church? Next door to our church.
They're but good ideas. The idea of just those people who are just physically right next door to us, how are they travelling? Do we actually see them? Now, because I live in a big block of land, I don't just run into my neighbours. I have to intentionally track them down. And I've chatted to both sides and they're all going okay. But I think, yeah, check on your neighbour. All right, Ross. Ross Howard, hit unmute. You know, hey, Bob, can you unmute individual people or not?
Everyone's unmuted.
Unmute Ross.
I'm unmuted.
Okay.
The simple thing I'm trying to do is stay in touch with people on the telephone that I'm no longer seeing. And I'm not actually doing that with church people, but work type people that I don't see anymore. So do that to with varying degrees of success, but that's what I'm trying to do.
All right. Good plan. All right, Krista. What are you going to do?
Unmute. Unmute.
Yeah, I can hear, I think. Just say something.
She's muted.
Yeah. You got to hit unmute, Krista. Oh, the joys of Zoom. Actually, it does say that we're all unmuted. Oh, no, here we go. Krista.
He's still muted.
Oh, it doesn't actually let me unmute you. Isn't that terrible?
It's Bob's job.
Okay,
Hey, Bob.
the host just done.
There you go. Right. What are you going to do, Krista?
We were talking, well, I'm not a very good cook, but if somebody at church was like, this is what we're going to cook, and then we all cooked it and then gave it to community members, it obviously has to be hot because the virus is cooked out when it's something hot. I would be involved in that.
What I loved about your answer, Krista, it's a good idea. And I loved about the fact on my Zoom, Elijah and Leander are directly on top of you. And the minute you said cook, you should have seen the look on their faces.
Yeah.
It was a mixture of amusement and horror.
Accurate.
Hard to cook for her.
Yeah. I could deliver
Robin Tucker. Robin Tucker, what are you going to do?
Well, we have family members that are elderly, and so in the actual immediate time, do the shopping and stuff like that. Yeah, that's the main thing that I have been doing, but I don't know. You know, the idea of cooking, you have to know who needs things too. That's the hard part, isn't it?
But you know what, Robin, you've brought a really good idea forward, because I can tell you, we have 4 grandparents between Deborah and myself, all in their 90s. And we've gone through a period of not being game to see them because, you know, you don't want to be the person who walks into a nursing home and retirement village and makes everyone sick, do you? So we've just stayed away. But the lack of communication's been really hard for them. And so what we can do is that what I can tell you is that old people, like really seriously old people, are not that good with technology. And so we've got a new phone, a smartphone. Callan's got it going. We've showed them how to use Facebook Messenger to do video chats, which they didn't know how to use before. And so you can actually support older people through just showing them and supporting them in their technology use. And it's amazing how much joy an elderly person gets from having a video chat where they get to see the other person and just talk to them on the phone. And you'd be surprised how many people who are over even 75 don't know how to do that. So the idea of being some sort of support is a big thing. So Steve, Raymond, I can see you there. We've got the 3 angels thing coming up. Do you want to say anything about that? All right.
Robin will have a look.
Okay.
Look, I think Robin has made a huge effort. She's kept very much in touch with, can you hear me, Ryan?
Yep.
She's kept very much in touch,
Yep.
with people in Nepal. They are doing it tough. The school building has fallen apart. They tried to fix it, but the owner has kicked them out. So they've actually now found another building to rent, and they're going to move the school, and they're preparing it for reopening. So, you know, this idea of the gap getting wider is really been very big, and we would really support, encourage people to support this program, and we'll have more information when we come. You know, just driving down today, it's amazing how the campaign is reaching. There was a long phone call from somebody in Melbourne who received the email, and so share it with your friends. You just never know who might be able to support the work and support what we're doing. So when you get the emails, when you get the messages on Facebook, please go ahead. Instagram, please share it with who you think might be interested.
All right, thanks, Steve. You know, I'll sort of wind this down now. What I want to say is that the whole idea is that if each of us have this attitude, now that we've got through the initial shock and we've had the reaction, which is limbic based, of sort of need to keep ourselves safe and all that sort of stuff. Now that we've gone into this mode where we're actually thinking about it a little bit more, I think that what it would be a good zone for all of us to be in is that we don't have to conquer the world. It's a matter of what can I do this week and in some small little way to help somebody else out. And I think if we have that as an attitude, I think that, and if Australia generally does that sort of thing, my goodness, what a place that we'd live in. And if ever there was a time that we need to be supporting our neighbours, it's got to be now. So that's the end for me. So Bob, I hope you have enjoyed your rest. We could ask people to vote well whether it was better than last week. Do you want me to do that?
No. Robin Tucker wants to say something.
Yeah.
Sorry, Robin. Over it.
Also, the other thing that we can do too is there's quite a few people that aren't on Zoom from our own church that for various reasons, whether they can't or whether they've chosen to go elsewhere, I don't know. Contact them and just make sure they're okay.
Yeah.
Yep. I'd just like to do a little plug for those that wish to. At every Friday at 10 o'clock, we have the ladies chit chat, whether it's advertised or not. The last few weeks there's only been a couple on, and that's fine if you don't need to, but for those that are at home and just feeling lonely, we only do a 40-minute chat, so you're welcome to come on if you like. It's nice just to see friendly faces. So yeah, 10 o'clock on Friday mornings.
Marvellous. All right, do we finish with a prayer? Do you want me to pray, Bob?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
All right, let's just finish with a prayer. Hey, God, we just know it's a bit of a surreal world we find ourselves in. And in this circumstance, we just want to acknowledge and thank you that you're our God and Saviour and that our sin condition has been taken care of. And now, as a result of that, we want to get out and act and do things. And we just pray that your Holy Spirit will empower us to be the best versions of ourselves. And in even just small ways, we can try and make the people around us, their lives a bit better as everyone's struggling during the current crisis. So be with us and bless our church. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you, Peter.
Thanks, Peter.
Thanks, Pete.
Thank you.
No worries.
It's been the best Sabbath in 10 weeks. And we've been doing this for 10 weeks now.
Wow.